At my engagement party, my fiancée, Chloe, who I put through law school, publicly humiliated me by dancing intimately with her best friend. I just smiled, knowing my moment would come. When their keys didn't work and her career crumbled, I realized justice truly tasted sweet. Like, share, and let us know where you're listening from. Life, at 32, felt like a perfectly orchestrated symphony for me. My name is Adam, and I was a successful attorney in Dallas, specializing in class action lawsuits. The meticulous pursuit of justice for the wronged, the satisfaction of turning the tide against colossal corporations, it all fueled me. My firm was thriving, my condo in Uptown offered sprawling views of the city, and my carefully cultivated existence radiated an aura of control and accomplishment. I had worked tirelessly to build this life, leaving behind humble beginnings, driven by an unshakable belief that dedication and intelligence could forge any destiny. My career was my masterpiece, each case a stroke, each victory a vibrant hue on the canvas of my ambition. 3 years ago, a new, unexpected color had entered that canvas. It happened at a charity fundraiser, an obligatory event I'd attended primarily for networking. That night, amidst the clinking of glasses and the drone of polite conversation, I saw her, Chloe. She moved through the room with an infectious energy, a genuine warmth that seemed to thaw the often chilly atmosphere of such gatherings. Her laugh, bright and unrestrained, drew my gaze, and when our eyes met, a spark ignited. She was strikingly beautiful, yes, but it was her zest for life, her effortless charm, that truly captivated me. Our connection was immediate, almost visceral. Within weeks, we were inseparable, falling into a passionate, intense love that felt both exhilarating and profoundly comforting. Chloe was everything I hadn't realized I was missing, a vibrant counterpoint to my methodical nature, a source of boundless joy and laughter. The 6 months that followed were a blur of shared dreams, late-night conversations, and the quiet understanding that our lives were irrevocably intertwined. It felt utterly natural when she moved into my condo, her bright personality filling the spaces that had once felt grand but a little empty. Chloe had expressed a desire to pursue law school, a dream she'd deferred due to financial constraints. For me, supporting her was a given, an investment in what I wholeheartedly believed was our future. I paid her tuition, bought her a reliable car, and encouraged her every step of the way, swelling with pride as I watched her dedicate herself to her studies. I saw us, a formidable legal power couple, shaping a future where we could both pursue our passions and build something extraordinary together. It was a vision I cherished, a testament to the belief that love, combined with ambition, could conquer anything. It was roughly 2 months into our whirlwind romance before Chloe moved in that she introduced me to Leo Blackwood. My best friend from undergrad, she'd announced, her voice bubbling with affection. Leo was coming to Dallas for an art exhibition, a term I would later learn was as vague as his actual artistic output. When he arrived at my condo for dinner, my initial unease was immediate and instinctual. He stood framed in my doorway, a deliberately disheveled figure, clad in faded jeans, a rumpled linen shirt, and an air of studied bohemianism. His dark, unruly hair looked as though it hadn't seen a comb in days, a stark contrast to my own immaculately tailored suit. His greeting was a masterclass in passive aggression. Extending a hand that felt overly firm, almost challenging, he drawled, "So you're the suit who's stolen our Chloe." The emphasis on "our" wasn't lost on me. It was a verbal jab, an instant demarcation of territory, making me feel like an interloper in a space I had every right to occupy. Chloe, oblivious or choosing to ignore the undertone, merely laughed, pulling him into a warm hug. That dinner was an exercise in subtle torment. Leo spent the better part of the evening reminiscing with Chloe about college inside jokes, obscure anecdotes, and shared experiences that deliberately excluded me. Their laughter, once charming, now felt like a secret language, each shared glance a conspiratorial whisper designed to highlight my outsider status. He made pointed comments about the corporate grind and selling your soul for a paycheck, clearly aimed at my profession. When I attempted to engage him in conversation about his art, his descriptions were vague, almost deliberately obtuse. He spoke of conceptual installations, and deconstructing societal norms without ever describing a tangible piece of work or how exactly he funded his supposedly artistic endeavors. A deep suspicion began to brew within me. His whole persona, the vague professional identity, the thinly veiled disdain for anyone with a structured career, it all added up. I internally concluded that Leo was nothing more than a professional mooch, a parasite cleverly disguised as a tortured artist. He radiated an entitlement that grated against my self-made sensibilities, an expectation that the world, or at least Chloe, owed him something simply for existing. After Leo finally left, taking his bohemian airs and passive-aggressive barbs with him, I turned to Chloe, my concern etched on my face. He's an interesting character, I began carefully, trying to choose my words. What exactly does he do for a living? His art seemed rather undefined. Chloe's reaction was immediate and defensive. Her usually open face tightened, her eyes flashing with an unfamiliar sharpness. Adam, he's an artist, she stated, her voice edged with impatience. He's just in a transitional period right now, trying to find his footing. You wouldn't understand, it's not like corporate law. She brushed off my concerns, dismissing them as the rigid judgment of a man who couldn't comprehend the struggles of the creative spirit. I let it drop. I loved Chloe, and I wanted to trust her judgment. Perhaps I was being overly critical, projecting my own logical, results-oriented worldview onto someone who genuinely lived a different kind of life. I rationalized it, telling myself that Leah was merely a temporary remnant of her past, a vestige of her younger, more experimental days. I believed, perhaps naively, that as our future together solidified, as Chloe immersed herself in her own promising legal career, Leah would simply fade away, a forgotten shadow in the brilliant light of our shared life. My initial hopeful assessment of Leo Blackwood proved to be profoundly, almost comically wrong. Over the next 3 years, the temporary remnant of her past didn't fade. Instead, he solidified into an increasingly problematic and calculated presence in our lives, a persistent shadow I couldn't seem to shake. He would arrive in Dallas with vague pronouncements of inspiration strikes or exploring new mediums, never with a concrete plan, always with an implicit expectation of being hosted. Leo, the self-proclaimed artistic visionary, never seemed to complete any actual artwork. His projects were always in progress, conceptual, or too profound for commercial understanding. What he did excel at, however, was mooching. He had an uncanny knack for appearing just before a meal, suggesting expensive restaurants Adam would inevitably pay for, or needing just a small loan to cover studio rent that never seemed to yield any art. His critiques of my corporate drone life became a common refrain, delivered with an air of superior enlightenment. Don't you ever feel trapped, Adam, in that suit, in that routine, he'd ask, swirling a glass of my expensive whiskey, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. It's all so predictable, so uninspired. I tolerated him, mainly for Chloe. She would always rush to his defense, her eyes softening as she explained, "He's like a brother to me, Adam. We've been through everything together." There was a history there, a shared past from their formative years, and I understood the depth of those bonds. But understanding didn't quell the rising irritation. Leo, despite his brotherly status, had an unsettling habit of lingering his gaze on Chloe, his eyes following her across the room with an intensity that felt inappropriate. He would seize any excuse to touch her arm or shoulder, a casual brush that felt anything but accidental to my watchful eyes. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible possessiveness, a silent claim on her attention and affection that I found increasingly grating. Then came the late-night calls. They started innocently enough, a quick question about some obscure detail from their college days, but soon escalated. Leo began calling Chloe at 2 a.m., sometimes 3 a.m., with what he described as emergencies that apparently required her immediate attention. A creative block that sent him into an existential spiral, a minor spat with a fleeting girlfriend that felt like the end of the world, or a sudden burst of inspiration that he just had to share. These were never truly urgent, never life or death, yet Chloe would often slip out of bed, her face creased with concern, to talk him down from whatever manufactured crisis he was orchestrating. I'd lie awake listening to the hushed tones of her voice, a growing sense of frustration and unease simmering beneath my calm exterior. The boiling point came one night at 1:30 a.m. We had just settled into bed after a demanding week, both of us exhausted. The sharp ring of Chloe's phone cut through the silence like a knife. She grabbed it reflexively, and I heard Leo's voice, thick with distress, even from across the room. He was distraught, inconsolable, claiming his latest relationship had just imploded, leaving him utterly heartbroken. Chloe, without a moment's hesitation, began offering comfort, her voice soft and empathetic. That was it, I snapped. I sat up, the carefully constructed facade of patience crumbling. Chloe, it's 1:30 in the morning, I said. My voice low but firm, the words clipped. Can this not wait until a reasonable hour? She pulled the phone away from her ear, her brow furrowed in annoyance. Speak, Adam, please, he's really upset. He needs me. I took a deep breath, trying to control the surge of anger. He needs you at 1:30 in the morning? What about our need for sleep? What about our peace? She ended the call, though I could tell by her expression that she was merely postponing the conversation with Leo, not ending it. She turned to me, her eyes flashing with defensiveness. Adam, you don't understand. Emotions don't keep office hours. I shot back, the words coming out sharper than I intended. Neither do boundaries, Chloe, and Leo seems to have absolutely none when it comes to ours. I ran a hand through my hair, the weariness of enduring this dynamic finally spilling over. Why is it that every time Leo's life hits a minor snag, you're the first person he calls, regardless of the hour? Why can't he maintain healthy relationships? And why do you constantly allow him to dump all his emotional baggage on you, disrupting our lives in the process? Chloe's posture stiffened, her face hardening into a stubborn mask. You just don't understand our friendship, Adam. You're being completely unfair. He's vulnerable right now. Unfair, I countered, my voice rising slightly. What's unfair is his complete disregard for our shared time, for our rest, for the respect due to a relationship he claims to value. This isn't friendship, Chloe. This is a pattern of emotional dependence, and it's becoming increasingly intrusive. The argument hung heavy in the air, a thick blanket of unspoken resentment. She avoided my gaze, pulling the covers tighter around herself. We'll talk about this tomorrow, Adam, she mumbled, her voice tight with dismissal. But I knew with a sinking certainty that tomorrow would bring no real resolution. Like so many other issues involving Leo, this one would simply be swept under the rug, left to fester, waiting for the next late-night emergency to bring it back to the surface. And I, the corporate drone with boundaries, would once again be left feeling like the antagonist, the one who just didn't understand. I've never considered myself the jealous type. My confidence stemmed from achievement, from the tangible results of hard work and intellect. I wasn't threatened by other men, especially not by those who preferred to float through life on a cloud of artistic pretensions. But Leo Blackwood, with his smirking condescension and Chloe's infuriating blind spot where he was concerned, set my teeth on edge like no one else ever had. It wasn't just the late-night calls or the subtle invasions of our personal space. It was the growing financial encroachments that truly started to chip away at my patience and trust. One evening, I returned home from a particularly grueling day at the firm, looking forward to a quiet dinner with Chloe. Instead, I was met by a nervous, almost apologetic Chloe fidgeting in the living room. Her usual vibrant energy was dimmed, replaced by an anxious uncertainty. Adam, I need to tell you something, she began, twisting her hands together. My stomach tightened. I braced myself, a premonition of Leo-related trouble already forming. She confessed, haltingly, that she had lent Leo $2,000 from our joint savings account. My heart sank. $2,000. For what, I wondered, could he possibly need that much cash with such urgency? He needed it for a down payment, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. For a vintage convertible he said he absolutely needed for a commission. Something about creative freedom and finding inspiration on the open road. The words echoed with Leo's familiar hollow rhetoric. I knew that money came from our shared funds, savings we had been diligently building for our future, and a cold certainty washed over me that money was never coming back. My anger flared, hot and immediate. You lent him $2,000 from our joint account without even discussing it with me, Chloe? For a car? A vintage convertible that's supposedly for a commission he's never once proven he has? Do you honestly believe he'll ever repay that? My voice, usually calm and measured, was laced with incredulity and frustration. The unilateral decision, the sheer audacity of it, was what stung most. It was a breach of trust, a fundamental disrespect for our partnership and the financial stability we were building together. Chloe rushed to his defense, her anxiety giving way to a desperate plea. He needs it for work, Adam. This is important for his career. He promised he's good for it. He said he has a big sale coming up. She moved closer, taking my hands in hers, her eyes pleading, "Please don't be mad. He's my best friend." I closed my eyes for a moment, forcing myself to take a deep, calming breath. The situation was already done. The money was gone. Fighting about it now would only cause more friction, more distance between us. I loved Chloe, and I didn't want this incessant interference from Leo to poison our relationship. I opened my eyes, meeting her earnest gaze. "All right, Chloe," I said, my voice heavy with resignation. "But if, and I mean if, he ever repays it, that money goes directly into your personal savings account. And from now on, any financial decision, especially one involving this kind of sum, must be discussed with me first. This is our shared life, our shared future, and we need to make these decisions together." She nodded vigorously, her relief palpable, promising that it would never happen again. Of course, as I predicted, Leo never repaid the money. There were the predictable excuses. The commission fell through, economic downturn for the arts, a sudden unexpected expense. Each excuse more elaborate and less believable than the last. Eventually, I just let it go. The constant battles over Leo were eroding the joy in our relationship, and I decided that $2,000, while a significant sum, wasn't worth the perpetual strain it put on Chloe and me. It was a costly lesson, but one that further solidified my opinion of Leo. The car incident wasn't an isolated event. There was also the 3-week period when Leo, having been evicted from his art studio/apartment for consistently not paying rent, crashed on our living room couch. He brought with him a general air of disorder, leaving his meager belongings strewn about, and often disappearing for days without a word, only to reappear with another story of artistic woes. It felt less like hosting a friend and more like harboring a vagrant, a sentiment I kept strictly to myself. As a litigator, I'd spent years studying human behavior, patterns, and motivations. I knew how to observe, how to gather evidence, how to build a case. And with Leo, I was building a case meticulously, silently. I had a strong feeling that he would eventually show his true colors, and when he did, I intended to be ready. I simply bided my time, honing my professional skills, trusting that the truth always found a way to reveal itself. Then came the professional triumph that changed everything. I successfully led a class-action lawsuit against a major pharmaceutical company, securing a monumental $500 million settlement for thousands of victims. It was the biggest case of my career, a testament to years of relentless effort and strategic thinking. The firm was abuzz. My name was on everyone's lips, and talks of partnership became a reality rather than a distant dream. I was on top of the world, feeling the exhilaration of hard-earned success. To celebrate, I decided to host a dinner party at our condo, a grand affair worthy of the occasion. It would be a gathering of my esteemed colleagues, clients, and Chloe's closest friends. And, inevitably, despite my reservations, Leo. Chloe insisted, of course, that her best friend had to be there for such a momentous occasion. I conceded, a flicker of apprehension mixed with the triumph. It was my night, my celebration, and I was determined that nothing, not even Leo, would diminish it. This was my moment to shine, and perhaps, finally, for Chloe to see the stark contrast between the two men in her life. The day of the dinner party dawned bright and clear, matching the effervescence of my mood. I spent the entire day consumed by preparations, a flurry of activity that left me feeling intensely happy and profoundly proud. I meticulously arranged the catering, ensured the wine selection was impeccable, and personally oversaw every detail to create the perfect celebratory atmosphere. The $500 million settlement, the firm-wide acclaim, the imminent partnership. It all felt like a validation of every sacrifice, every late night, every challenge I had overcome. This was my moment, a tangible manifestation of my ambition and skill, and I savored every second of it. Chloe found me in the living room, adjusting the lighting just so, a contented hum on my lips. She watched me for a moment, a peculiar expression on her face, a blend of fondness and something I couldn't quite place. "You look happy," she observed, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Then with a faint, almost uncertain smile, she added, "I'm proud of you. You know that, right?" The words were meant to be reassuring, but the tone, the almost imperceptible hesitation, registered somewhere in the back of my mind as a subtle discord in the perfect symphony of my day. Yet I dismissed it, blinded by the glow of my success in the eager anticipation of the evening ahead. I was too high on life to entertain any potential warning signs. The evening began flawlessly. Our condo hummed with the sophisticated chatter of my colleagues, their partners, and Chloe's more palatable friends. Congratulations flowed freely, punctuated by genuine admiration for the magnitude of my recent victory. Chloe surprisingly played the role of the proud partner beautifully. She recounted snippets of the trial, occasionally interjecting with details that painted me in a heroic light, her eyes sparkling with an enthusiasm that seemed entirely genuine. For a while, the vision I had held for our future felt vibrantly, gloriously real. Midway through the main course, however, the inevitable discordant note struck. Leo, having steadily worked his way through a good portion of my expensive bourbon collection, suddenly decided it was time to launch into one of his signature public critiques. He leaned forward, his eyes glazed with a mixture of alcohol and self-importance, and declared loudly enough for several tables to hear, "It's truly fascinating, Adam, how you dedicate your life to being a cog in the capitalist machine. All that brilliance harnessed for profit. What a tragic waste of true artistic potential." He punctuated his statement with a dramatic sigh, as if genuinely pained by my perceived spiritual poverty. A snort of derision erupted from across the table. It was Oliver, one of my sharpest colleagues, a man who tolerated no nonsense. Coming from the man currently enjoying a glass of 20-year-old single malt paid for by said capitalist machine, Oliver quipped, his eyebrow raised in a perfect arc of dry wit. A ripple of polite, restrained laughter spread through the room. The jab landed, and Leo, for once, seemed momentarily taken aback. I seized the opportunity, keeping my tone deceptively calm. "Speaking of the arts, Leo," I interjected, a slight smile playing on my lips, "how is that art collection coming along? Any breakthroughs with that Austin gallery you mentioned?" Leo puffed himself up, recovering quickly. "Ah, yes, the Austin Collective. They've expressed considerable interest. Things are finally moving, Adam. My vision is finally being recognized." The words, as always, were vague, lacking any specific details, but delivered with his usual conviction. Before I could press for more, Chloe quickly interjected, her voice bright and a little too loud. "Oh, that's wonderful news, Leo. I'm so happy for you." Under the table, I felt the sharp, unmistakable kick of her foot against my shin. It was her silent signal. "Drop it. Don't ruin this." The conversation mercifully shifted, moving on to safer topics, and I allowed myself a moment of relief, believing the worst of Leo's antics for the evening were over. As the dinner progressed and I excused myself to retrieve the dessert from the kitchen, a decadent chocolate lava cake that was Chloe's favorite, I overheard voices, Leo and Chloe. Their tones were low, hushed, but the acoustics of my open-plan condo were not forgiving. I paused in the hallway, unseen as I listened. Leo's voice was intense, laced with an unsettling possessiveness. "Chloe, we need to talk. You're changing, and honestly, it's not in a good way." My blood ran cold. I gripped the dessert tray, the delicate plates rattling slightly. Chloe's response was barely audible, a soft murmur of confusion. "What are you talking about, Leo?" "This isn't you," he insisted, his voice hardening. "The Chloe I know wouldn't settle for this. This lifestyle, this gilded cage. You're letting him turn you into something you're not, something you never wanted to be." His words, dripping with condemnation, clearly referred to our shared life, the successful, comfortable existence I had built for us. He was actively undermining me, questioning her choices, sowing seeds of doubt about everything we had together, right in my own home, on my night of triumph. My composure, usually ironclad, threatened to crack. I took a deep breath, composed myself, and then, with the dessert tray held aloft, I rounded the corner into the kitchen, feigning complete innocence. "Everything all right in here?" I asked, my voice light, a smile plastered on my face. "Dessert's ready? Everyone's waiting." Chloe jumped, startled, her cheeks flushing. Leo merely gave me a tight, unreadable smile. I steered them both back to the dining table, the chocolate lava cake a silent offering against the new unsettling tension that now filled the air. The joy of the evening had been irrevocably tainted, and a cold certainty settled in my gut. This was far from over. This story is far from over, and the truth is about to unravel in a way you won't believe. Stay with me. Watch until the end. And if you are finding yourself gripped by this unfolding drama, please like, share, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss a single detail. The dessert plates had just been set, the rich aroma of chocolate filling the room, a brief reprieve from the tension that had lingered after my kitchen encounter with Chloe and Leo. But the reprieve was fleeting. Leo, now completely emboldened by the generous quantities of bourbon he'd consumed, clearly decided it was time for his grand finale. He pushed back his chair, the scraping sound echoing in the momentary lull of conversation, and raised his glass, not in a toast, but in a dramatic gesture that drew all eyes to him. His gaze swept over the table, finally settling on Chloe, who was sitting beside me, looking increasingly uncomfortable. His voice, thick with alcohol and self-righteousness, cut through the air. "Chloe, I just want you to be happy," he declared, his tone dripping with false concern. Then with a theatrical sigh, he added, "You know, you could do way better than him." He gestured vaguely in my direction, dismissing me with a flick of his wrist. The room fell into a sudden, suffocating silence. It was the kind of silence that amplifies every heartbeat, every intake of breath. Chloe's forced smile froze on her face, a brittle mask that betrayed the shock in her eyes. I waited, my breath held tight in my chest, for her to leap to my defense, to refute his outrageous claim, to stand up for the man who had given her everything. She didn't. Her eyes darted from Leo to me, then down to her lap, her silence a deafening confirmation of all my deepest, most unsettling suspicions. A cold, heavy sensation settled in my chest, a profound chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the chill of betrayal, of a devastating truth laid bare. Yet years of legal training, of maintaining composure under pressure, kicked in. My face remained impassive, my posture straight. I met Leo's defiant gaze, a calm, almost curious expression on my face. "Oh," I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "And what precisely does better look like, Leo? Do enlighten us." Leo puffed out his chest, emboldened by Chloe's silence and my apparent calm. "Someone who gets you, Chloe," he proclaimed, his voice growing louder. "Someone who truly shares your values. Someone creative, who understands the real struggles of an artist's soul, not just corporate ledgers." The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air, a thinly veiled declaration. Someone like him. I pressed him, an icy determination now replacing the initial shock. "Please, Leo, don't stop there. Be specific. What exactly do you believe Chloe deserves that I am not providing? What grand vision of happiness are you offering her from your unique vantage point?" Chloe finally found her voice, a desperate whisper. "Adam, stop. Please, don't do this." She tugged at my arm, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and embarrassment. But I ignored her. The dam had broken. The years of quiet resentment, the suppressed frustrations, the countless slights, all boiled to the surface. It was time for the truth, however ugly, to be spoken. Leo, emboldened further by Chloe's protests, took it as validation. "He only cares about winning cases, about making partner," Leo sneered, pointing a finger at me. "He's trying to mold you, Chloe, into some kind of corporate wife trophy, stripping away everything that makes you unique, everything that makes you you." The accusation, so utterly hypocritical, ignited a quiet fury within me. I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering as it locked onto Leo's. The Chloe I knew, I countered, my voice clear and cutting through the silence, was broke. The Chloe I knew was struggling, living paycheck to paycheck, burdened by student debt, and considering dropping out of law school because she couldn't afford the tuition. Is that the real Chloe you're referring to, Leo? The one before the corporate machine supposedly ruined her? I didn't stop. The words flowed, precise and relentless, each one a hammer blow of truth. Let's be clear about what I provided, shall we? I paid her tuition not for one semester, but for her entire law school education. I bought her a reliable car so she could get to her classes and internships. This condo, the gilded cage you so eloquently disparage, is largely funded by my work, my corporate ledgers. I pay the mortgage. I pay for this dinner. I pay for the expensive bourbon you're currently enjoying, a bourbon you wouldn't be able to afford on your artistic income. My gaze shifted to Chloe, then back to Leo. And what have you provided, Leo? Beyond late-night emotional dumping and endless critiques? You borrowed $2,000 from our joint account for a vintage convertible that you never repaid. You lived on our couch for 3 weeks because you couldn't pay your own rent. Is that the creative support, the shared values you're offering her, an endless cycle of dependence? Chloe finally exploded, but her fury, to my utter shock, was not directed at Leo, the architect of this public humiliation. It was directed squarely at me. She sprang to her feet, her face contorted with rage, her voice a furious hiss. How dare you? How dare you embarrass Leo like this? You're just jealous, Adam. Jealous because I have a connection with him that I don't have with you. The room went deadly quiet, the stunned silence more profound than before. My colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Chloe's friends looked mortified. In that moment, watching the raw venom in her eyes, hearing those damning words, a profound, cold realization washed over me. It wasn't just Leo, it was Chloe. She wasn't just tolerating him. She was actively enabling him, defending him, and choosing him over me. The depth of her betrayal, her profound disrespect, hit me with a force that stole my breath. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping harshly against the polished floor. My eyes met hers, and I saw nothing but a stranger. My apologies, everyone, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. It seems the party is over. Without another word, without a backward glance, I turned and walked out of my own celebratory dinner, leaving behind the wreckage of my relationship and the shattered remnants of my carefully constructed life. I stood on the balcony of my condo, the cool night air biting at my skin, doing little to cool the fire still raging within me. Below, I watched as the last of the bewildered guests hastily departed, their cars pulling away into the Dallas night. The laughter, the congratulations, the dreams of a shared future, all replaced by an echoing emptiness. My head, however, felt clearer than it had in years. The fog of infatuation and misplaced loyalty had finally lifted, revealing the stark, undeniable truth. A few minutes later, the sliding glass door hissed open behind me. It was Chloe, her face streaked with tears, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. How could you, Adam? She accused, her eyes red-rimmed. How could you humiliate Leo like that in front of everyone? I turned, my gaze unwavering, devoid of any warmth. Humiliate Leo? I retorted, my voice flat, almost emotionless. He humiliated me first, Chloe. Publicly, repeatedly, and with your silent endorsement. And when I finally stood up for myself, you chose to defend him. Not me. The words hung heavy in the air, undeniable and stark. What exactly am I to you, Chloe? I asked, the question cutting through the remaining threads of our relationship. It was a question I had perhaps never truly dared to ask for fear of the answer. She faltered, her resolve momentarily crumbling. My boyfriend, my partner, she stammered, her voice thin. Your boyfriend who paid for your law school tuition? Your partner who bought you a car, gave you a home, supported you emotionally and financially through everything. I listed the facts, not as an accusation, but as a cold, hard summary of my investment, an investment she had so readily devalued. I am done, Chloe, done tolerating his disrespect, Done being made to feel like an outsider in my own home, and done being with someone who doesn't stand up for me when it matters most. Her eyes, wide and disbelieving, finally registered the gravity of my words. The tears flowed freely now, genuine anguish replacing her previous anger. You're, you're breaking up with me? She choked out, her voice barely a whisper, then a fresh wave of indignation. You're asking me to choose between my boyfriend and my best friend? My gaze hardened. No, Chloe, I clarified, my voice steady. I'm asking you to choose between a man who loves and supports you, who has consistently invested in your future and our shared life, and a man who has consistently taken from you, undermined you, and offered nothing but emotional manipulation and hollow promises. The fact that you even find it difficult to choose, that you have to figure something out, tells me everything I need to know. Her shoulders slumped. The defiance drained from her, replaced by a profound resignation. She stared at me for a long moment, a silent plea in her eyes that I no longer felt capable of answering. Fine, she said, her voice barely audible. Fine, I'll stay with Leo until I figure something out. And with that, she turned and walked back inside, the door hissing shut behind her, sealing the end of our life together. My next actions were swift, precise, and devoid of emotion. Within the hour, I called a locksmith and had the locks changed on my condo. Then, with a methodical efficiency that masked the profound ache in my chest, I packed all of Chloe's belongings, her clothes, her books, her personal effects, into boxes. I arranged for a courier service to deliver them directly to Leo's last known address, along with a note informing him of the new owner of the vintage convertible. I immediately removed her from all joint bank accounts, severing every financial tie. Finally, I made the call to the law school, informing them that I would no longer be responsible for Chloe's tuition payments. The investment in our future was officially liquidated. The weeks that followed blurred into a monotonous cycle of work and silence. I immersed myself in cases, in depositions, in the meticulous details of legal strategy, anything to fill the void. I cut all contact, blocking her number, unfollowing her on social media, erasing her from my digital life as effectively as I had from my physical one. The silence was deafening, yet strangely peaceful. Then, about a month later, she appeared. I opened my door one evening to a sight that was almost unrecognizable. Chloe stood there, looking terrible. Her vibrant energy was gone, replaced by a gaunt pallor, her eyes sunken and red-rimmed. Her clothes were rumpled, her hair disheveled. She looked like a ghost of the woman I had once loved. Tears welled in her eyes as she practically collapsed against my doorframe. Adam, she choked out, please, I made a horrible mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. I need a second chance. Leo is not who I thought he was. The dam of her composure finally broke, and she began to sob, the words tumbling out in a rush. Leo, she revealed, had become incredibly possessive, jealous of her time, actively discouraging her studies, claiming they distracted her from true artistic expression. He had, in fact, been seeing a wealthy gallery owner for months, manipulating Chloe with tales of grand commissions while subtly isolating her. His artistic vision was a carefully constructed facade to secure a comfortable life for himself, and he had simply used Chloe as another stepping stone, another source of emotional and financial support until a better one came along. I've lost everything, Adam, she confessed, her voice thick with despair. My enrollment, my internship. My parents found out about everything and cut me off. I have nowhere to go. She looked at me, a desperate, raw plea in her eyes. A pang of guilt, sharp and unwelcome, shot through me. The sight of her, broken and distraught, was almost unbearable. But then the cold, hard logic kicked in. I thought of the late-night calls, the public humiliation, her choice to defend him, not me. I thought of the years of subtle erosion, the constant undermining. I remained calm, my voice steady, though it cost me everything. Chloe, it wasn't a mistake, I said, my gaze firm. It was a choice, a series of choices, in fact. You chose to prioritize Leo, to enable his behavior, to disrespect our relationship. You only regret the consequences of that choice, not the choice itself. I took a deep breath. And I concluded, the words feeling like a heavy stone, I no longer trust you. There's nothing left to take back. Chloe, I said, my voice resonating with an unyielding finality, you need to figure out who you are without relying on anyone else. You have to stand on your own 2 feet. Despite the immense hurt, the sight of her brokenness stirred a vestige of my old affection. I reached into my wallet and pulled out $2,000 in crisp $100 bills, the exact amount she had so carelessly lent to Leo. Take this, I offered, extending the money. It's enough for a hotel for a few weeks to get you started. She took the money, her hand trembling, her eyes still pleading. She then turned and walked out, getting into the Honda I had bought her for law school. I watched her drive away, choosing not to demand the car back. It felt like a small, final act of severance, immaterial letting go of a painful chapter. The ensuing months were a blur of self-reinvention. I threw myself into rebuilding my life with the same intensity I applied to my cases. My condo, once filled with her presence, underwent a transformation. I renovated, redecorated, purging not just her belongings, but the lingering memories, creating a space that felt truly mine, unburdened by past expectations. At work, I embraced new challenges, new opportunities, channeling all my energy into my career. The firm officially made me partner, a goal I had achieved, but the celebration felt more subdued, more personal, no longer tied to the validation of another. 6 months after the breakup, life, with its uncanny ability to surprise, introduced me to Dr. Victoria Shaw. She was a brilliant corporate psychologist, brought in as an expert witness on a complex white-collar fraud case I was handling. Our professional relationship quickly blossomed into a deep intellectual friendship. Victoria was sharp, insightful, and possessed a quiet strength that I found incredibly appealing. She challenged me, not with passive aggression, but with thoughtful questions and perspectives that broadened my own. As our connection deepened, I confided in her my fears about falling in love again, about the vulnerability of opening myself up after such a profound betrayal. Victoria listened with empathy, her eyes warm and understanding. Adam, she had said, taking my hand, our dynamic is entirely different. We are two strong, independent individuals choosing to build something together, not one relying on the other. Your past isn't a blueprint for our future.